story time about why you should never go on spring break to Miami with your best friends. I thought we all had already learned this from all of the TikToks we've seen about best friends never coming back from Miami best friends, but you know what? Here we are with another, what should we call this? Lesson on why you should not take trips with your best friends to Miami. Okay, so a little background information. I was 20 years old and I was a sophomore in college, and I went to a pretty big school, so thankfully I was able to get an apartment off campus with some girls that I had became friends with. That being said, we had known each other, you know, not too long, but long enough to the point where we thought that we could trust each other, considering we all lived together. Well, after Christmas break, my one friend Sid mentioned that spring break was going to be here before we knew it, so we should all take a trip together. My eyebrows look botched right now, so let's please ignore that, even though I'm probably not going to try and fix them. Specifically, a trip down to Florida. We all thought that it was a smart idea because we're best friends. We always have a good time together. This would be awesome. This part of the story may get a little confusing, so just try to keep up. So out of 5 of us girls who lived in the apartment, only 4 of us were going. The one girl had already made plans with her family, and she also wasn't a super social person in general. The only reason why she moved in with us was so that way we had an extra person paying $300 a month. And not to be a bitch, but I don't think we would even notice if she came with us. Anyways, so the other 3 girls who were coming with me down to Florida were Sid, who was very manipulative, and she also just happened to be a complete bitch 24/7. And I'm not just saying like she had an attitude like a bitch. No, like she was a bully. Like the other girl who lives with us, she will bully her into doing anything for her 24/7, whether it's driving her somewhere, getting her alcohol, just that kind of stuff. But with that being said, the other girl who was coming was Mary, aka Sydney's bitch. She was extremely sweet and would never say no to anything you wanted her to do. The last girl, Leah, was extremely psychotic, and her whole personality basically revolved around being drunk 24/7. And she was that girl that was like, I'm one of the guys. I really feel like I don't have to explain what kind of girl that is, because we should all know that kind of girl by now. Like, it's 2022. If you haven't met one of these, where have you been? But other than that, Leah was kind of cool. Now that you know the whole squad, since Sydney came up with this idea, she was in charge of coming up with the budget, right? To make sure that everybody had enough money to last them the full 4 days, everything went smoothly, and yeah. Well, after coming up with the budget and everything, she figured out that for 4 days, we would all need $1,200. With that, she also thankfully planned where we would eat each day and stuff like that, you know. So that means that I would at least have to put away $100 a week if I had any plans on going on this trip. So like the boss-ass bitches that we were, we started saving up ASAP, and 2 months later, we had all the money to go on this trip. It was really easy for Sid to get the money because all she had to do was call up daddy and say, hey daddy, I'm going on a trip to Miami and I need some money. I'm not being a hater, but you'll see why I'm being a hater. So we all had our tickets, the hotel was booked, and now all we had to do was eat cheap and use our looks for drinks and make sure that we don't go broke before the end of this trip. Sounds easy enough, right? Wrong. Once we landed in Florida, everything was pretty good. The food was crazy. The hotel was easy access. There were hot guys literally all over the beach. Pin everywhere. So I was living my best life. So as soon as we got to the hotel, we put our skimpy ass 2-piece bikinis on and literally bolted to the beach. It was just how people explained it was in the movies. There was beautiful music. There was a shit ton of alcohol. So Leah was basically in heaven. And because of how everything went the first day, I thought this trip was honestly going to be a blast and pretty much nothing could go wrong. But then what happens? Something goes wrong. So the first day was a pretty long day. We were at the beach pretty much the whole freaking day. So we woke up the next morning and we went to breakfast and I went to pay and $700 is missing out of my wallet. Yes, $700, which is more than half of the money that I brought. Not to mention, I also pitched in on food and everything the first day to keep the hotel. So instead of asking everybody where my money went, I waited until we got home so that way I could go through all of my stuff, go through the hotel to make sure it didn't fall out of my wallet, even though I knew it didn't. I just didn't want to be that bitch who accuses everybody and then finds her shit later. How nice of me. At first I thought it could have been Sid or Leah, but when I asked them, their story checked out, so I did not think that it was them. So I have the hotel check the cameras and make sure that nobody came in our room while we were sleeping, and that all checked out. So at this point, I just assumed that maybe I blacked out and dropped my money last night. But then after Sid and Leah left, I started to panic again and I rummaged through everybody's shit. While I'm doing that, Mary comes in and she's like, "Are you looking for your money?" And at this point, I'm pissed and I'm like, "Yeah, did you fucking take it?" And she's like, "No, chill. I was only asking because Sid and Leah went into your purse last night, took your wallet, and took your money." And I'm like, "Leah, this is not time for fucking jokes. I've just been robbed." And honestly, I thought that it was Mary because, like I said, Leah and Sid's stories checked out. So she told me that she was the last one to come into the hotel last night, which does check out because on the cameras, they let me watch them. And she said that when she walked in, Sid and Leah walked out of mine and Mary's room. And when she asked what they were doing, they said, "Oh, we were just making sure that I'm okay because I got too drunk." Okay. Sure. And they went out onto the balcony, and on the balcony you can literally hear everything. So while Mary was in the kitchen putting stuff away, she hears Sydney and Leah talking about splitting the money. So at this point, I'm pissed. I'm ready to snap on everybody, but eventually Mary talks me out of it and she's like, "Listen, let's just come up with a plan, you know, we'll get it all figured out." So Mary and I went to lunch. She paid for my lunch, thankfully, and we got to talking and we came up with a plan to fuck up their whole trip just like they did for me. But before we did this, we made sure that we had everything organized because after this, I'm pretty sure there were going to be no apologies, and there weren't. At one point, we even thought about backing out because we all did live in the same house back at home, so this would have caused some mayhem. But at the end of the day, I don't really give a fuck because for Sid, whose parents are literally millionaires, to steal from me knowing that I'm at school only on a scholarship and then I'm barely making ends meet in general makes me sick. I mean, even though I knew that she was a manipulative bitch, I didn't think she was gonna be one to me. Like, girl, your dad has millions of dollars. Why are you gonna steal from me? I'm poor. Okay. Well, once we set the plan in motion, we started out by saying we were going to go out to a fancy dinner. We got some drinks so that way everybody could loosen up. And after that, I told them that we had a section at a Miami club. And at this point, they were a little sus because they knew that they took my wallet and they didn't know how I was affording this. So at that point, I just tell them, "Oh, I met some guys at the beach who said that they had a section and they would get us one that was right next to them." Some bullshit story, of course. And they were more than happy to go to the club and spend my fucking money. Sid was like, "OMG, like, this is one of the best clubs. Like, I'm so excited." Like, of course you are, you fucking snake. Respectfully, I wanted to tell her to shut the fuck up and shove all of her compliments up her ass because at that point, she was literally kissing my ass. Her and Leah. So once we get to the club, we get showed to our section. And once we were in the section, this is where the real plan kicked in. Okay? I told all the girlies, aka Sid and Leah, that this was on me, my treat to them for being such wonderful friends. I was super condescending, so I don't know how they didn't, like, get an off vibe from me, because I was throwing some attitude their way. Well, since Mary and I had paid for the dinner, and I told them everything was going to be on me today, they didn't think once to check their wallets. So I had Mary go and take their wallets, or not their whole wallets, they wouldn't have noticed. I had her go in and take their cards, okay? So before they're able to run their cards and see that they're absolutely broke and cannot pay for the $15,000 that we racked up that night, and who knows what they racked up after we left, Mary and I dipped. We were not going to stay for the aftermath. So Mary and I, we get into our Uber. We are ready to go to the airport, luggage and everything. And we just told Sid and Leah that we were going to go and meet some boys. And I don't know how they didn't see that as a red flag either, because first of all, they know that Mary would never go and meet boys that we had just met. And me, on the other hand, I just would never leave my friends for some dick. Well, once Mary and I left, we noticed that we had a fuck ton of calls from both Sydney and Leah, but at that point we just decided not to answer the phone. Like, after this shit that they pulled, like, I was completely done with them. After that, Mary and I were able to kick Sid out of the apartment because Mary was like the primary, I guess, on the lease. I don't know, something like that, whatever. Leah just decided to move out at that point because her only friend now was Sid, and she was the only one who would put up with her bullshit. So apparently Sid had to call her dad to pay for this tab, and instead of going to Spain for the summer, she has to work for her dad the whole summer to pay him back, as she should. So I guess Sid was pissed off that Leah didn't have to pay anything. She didn't get into any trouble, so her and Leah aren't friends anymore. Sid posted some pictures of Leah online with red cups and doing coke. So I don't know what the hell happened with those two, but all I know is they are not friends anymore. So moral of the story, don't go to Miami with your best friend.
My boyfriend went on a vacation with his ex behind my back. Should I break up with him? Disclaimer, I look extremely tired because I had been filming for 7 hours. I'm not sad, don't worry. Storytime was sending me on Instagram. My boyfriend and I have been together for 6 months only. Here's the thing, we never bring up our exes, like ever. From my perspective, I thought we had a really healthy relationship. We're both really into fitness, would work out together every single day, and we made time to cook together every single day. He asked me to move in with him 2 months after we started dating, but I said no. I explained to him that I just wasn't ready for that, and he got really upset. That's when things started changing. He began making up excuses about not being able to hang out with me, and sometimes he wouldn't even show up to our gym dates. And I guess one of the mistakes that I made was giving him his space. A few days later, he calls me and tells me that he's in Boston for a work trip. He didn't even tell me he was going on a trip. I just said okay. Then I tracked his location on my phone, and it turns out he's in the Bahamas. He forgot that I could track his location. I started investigating, and you'll never guess what I found. Part 2 is up. My boyfriend went on vacation with his ex behind my back. Should I break up with him? Disclaimer, is not my story time, was on Instagram. Also, I'm just really tired from filming. I'm not sad, I promise. After checking his location and seeing that he was actually in the Bahamas and not Boston where he told me he was going, started doing some investigating on Instagram. I scanned his Instagram for people that he tagged, and I finally came across his ex's profile. No, I had never done this before just because I didn't care about his ex. Like I said in part 1, we never talked about our exes. Fortunately, her account was set to private, so I couldn't see her pictures or stories. But I did see on her bio that she was currently in the Bahamas. From his location, I could see what hotel he was staying at. So I called the hotel and asked for his room number. And they put me through. My boyfriend answered the phone. And the first words out of his mouth were, "How did you find me here?" I told him I could see his location and that he must have forgotten. That's when he came up with his lie. His boss asked him to go to the Bahamas for emergency business, and that he didn't have time to call me and tell me about it. In the background, I could hear that somebody opened the door and I heard a woman's voice. He instantly hung up on me. So I called his phone, but he wouldn't answer. In fact, he turned his phone off. It wasn't until 4 days later that he actually showed up to my apartment apologizing. He said his phone broke and that he couldn't get one while he was in the Bahamas. Part 3 is up. My boyfriend went on vacation with his ex behind my back. Should I break up with him? Disclaimer, this is not my story time. Send me on Instagram. After 4 days of not hearing from my stupid boyfriend who was in the Bahamas, finally showed up to my apartment to apologize. I told him not to even bother because I knew that he was with his ex. Then he said, "You're right. I'm not even gonna lie to you." Then he came up with this whole story. He clearly had 4 days to think about it. Told me that his ex-girlfriend's boyfriend died and that she was in need of his help. She asked him to go to the Bahamas to spread her boyfriend's ashes. And of course, being the gentleman that he is, he said yeah. And that the only reason he didn't tell me was because he didn't want me to get jealous. So I asked him to confirm his story. I told him to call his ex and put her on speaker, and he refused. He said that I was being toxic and that doing that to his poor ex would bring up all the feelings she had from her boyfriend's death, and that she was grieving and I needed to respect her space. Gaslighting much? I told him I wouldn't believe him, and then I kicked him out. He told me I was being so insensitive towards him. So I asked his ex on Instagram if the whole story was true. She hasn't opened the message, and I'm still waiting for her to reply. It's been a few days since that happened, and my boyfriend keeps coming back to my apartment with flowers and champagne. He keeps apologizing and asking me not to break up with him. I know you're all thinking I should just leave him, but I really, really love him, and maybe the story is true. They shouldn't have lied. I can't confirm his story. What should I do?
I'm 16 and my stepbrother is 16, we'll call him H, and my dad 44 and his mom 33 started dating 2 years ago and married 1 year ago. They also moved in with us a year ago. My stepbrother and I go to the same school, we're both in year 11. However, we're polar opposites. I'm upper middle class, pretty slim, popular, devout Catholic, well-behaved, etc. And he's working class, quite chubby, atheist. He's also popular, however, he's your typical working class punk teen who has been arrested multiple times and constantly misbehaves. The school we go to is in northern England and is overwhelmingly working class, so it's a miracle that I've managed to fit in. Now to the point. Since they moved in, my dad and stepmom and my 2 youngest step-siblings have converted to Catholicism. However, H has refused. He said he was raised atheist and refuses to convert to Catholicism. This creates alienation in our family, with him being the odd one out. A lot of the time he's out sleeping on his friend's couch or he's confined to his room because my dad and stepmom always pester him about his religious beliefs. They try to force him to convert to Catholicism by threatening consequences if he doesn't go to church. However, nothing has worked. Today we were in English class. I'm in the same form group as H, and H was talking about how my dad nicked his mom and turned her into a religious nutcase. He also spoke about how he resents both my dad and his mom for trying to force him to assimilate to the church and alienating him just because he doesn't want to. I pretended not to hear him. However, I secretly wrote everything he was saying down with the intention of showing my stepmom and dad. When I got home later that day after school, I usually always get there before him because he's pissing about with his mates most of the time. I showed stepmom and dad what he had said. They were both livid and rang H up demanding that he come home immediately. When he got home, dad and stepmom shouted at him and demanded that he come to their room to talk. I put my ear on the door to listen, and they told him that he was no longer allowed in the house and disowned him. That was a bit harsh in my opinion. However, when H came out, he didn't look fussed at all, and he said that he'll just go sleep on his friend's couch. He's been gone for a couple hours now, and his stepmom and dad have received a lot of backlash from his aunt, uncle, cousins, extended family, etc. on my stepmom's side of the family. So he must have gotten in touch with his extended family about the incident. I have mixed feelings about this because I feel guilty for getting him kicked out. However, I think that stepmom and dad deserve to know that H resents them and dubs them as religious nutcases. Am I the asshole for getting my stepbrother kicked out of the house? My boyfriend, 31, in the past had a binge drinking problem before we met. By the time we met, he had been sober for years but had cirrhosis on his liver that doesn't look to be getting any better and had some really bad lab results. He also had an embolism in his lungs, so had reduced lung function and diabetes. He went to a liver specialist who mentioned that my boyfriend might need a liver transplant in the future, and he came back pretty bummed out about that, understandably. He then, not seriously, but kind of hopefully let me know that I should donate part of my liver to him if we matched. I told him no, and I was kind of in shock that he would ask. We've only been dating for 8 months, and while I like him, I'm not convinced he's the one yet. He has a lot of qualities that I like, but some of them drive me up the wall, including having poor personal hygiene and not looking after his diet and eating mostly fast food, which probably is what causes diabetes. He was surprised and then tried to cover it up by saying he didn't expect it and he was just joking. I felt like he was being serious but didn't want to seem that way, and I told him that I would only think about doing something so personal for a parent, sibling, or a spouse, and only if we were on good terms. He then joked that he could just ask me to marry him to get my liver, and I told him that now he's mentioned it, it would make any marriage proposal seem disingenuous, so I wouldn't get matched to see if I was a candidate beforehand. He got serious and told me that the liver isn't a big transplant and I would still be able to keep part of my liver. I told him that it doesn't matter that the liver regenerates, I wouldn't even think about doing it just for a boyfriend. He got offended and said that he would do it for me if the situation was reversed, and I said that the problem is that the situation isn't reversed, so I'm not convinced he would do it just because he's spouting platitudes. He got really angry and stormed out of the house, and he hasn't been back in hours. Am I the asshole for being overly honest with him and telling him that I wouldn't donate my liver to him? I live with a roommate and her 3-year-old child. My roommate is a 4th-year medical student and is really struggling, having to balance with the child, intense study workload, chores and part-time jobs to afford rent, babysitter and necessities. On the day of the biggest exam of her entire degree, her babysitter canceled last minute. She was absolutely frantic and hysterically called every one of her contacts to help. Of course, she asked me. She has asked me to babysit before and I always give her stern no. It's not the time that I need to spend, since I'm perfectly fine with swapping around chores, but the principle that I must be responsible for the child for the duration. For example, if the child hurts himself, no matter how badly, it would be on me. And I refuse to take the responsibility for something like that, so I always refuse to babysit. She begged and begged me, and since the journey to her exam is almost 2 hours away and she needed to go now, she just said, "I don't fucking care," and left the house. Frankly, I found this quite disrespectful, as it's trying to push me to babysit without my consent. Right after she left, I grabbed my coat and also left. She was starting her car when she saw me and asked what I was doing. I told her that I was going to watch a movie. I lied. I just refused to babysit without consent. Her eyes dropped and I could see the tears forming as she started begging me more to help her. I still explained the same thing, that it's not the time or effort, but the responsibility. She told me that she would sign a waiver that states that I am 100% not responsible no matter what happens. I'm not an expert in law, but I'm not sure if a waiver is even legally enforceable. Even so, it still carries a responsibility risk, so I stand my ground. Eventually, she became quiet and started sobbing whilst hitting herself. I, as respectfully as I can, asked if there's anything I can help with that does not involve babysitting the child. She told me to fuck off, so I did, and I actually went to watch a movie. It's been a few weeks and she still absolutely refuses to communicate with me. She still does her share of chores and we were pretty separate beforehand, so it wasn't that much of a difference in day-to-day life. I do feel pretty bad since I've seen from the past 2 years we've lived together that she has almost no free time and always sleeps later than me and wakes up earlier than me to cram a little bit of extra study time. I know the exam meant a lot to her and missing the exam might jeopardize her entire degree of 4 years. It sucks that her efforts for the past 2 years have gone on the drain, but that's not an excuse to cross my bottom line. Am I the asshole for forcing my roommate to miss her final exam that she spent 2 years studying for?
Am I wrong for refusing to divorce my husband? I, 30 female, met my husband Dave, 32 male, when we were little. He's been my best friend since we were 10. We were raised in very conservative Christian families in the Bible Belt. He followed the script expected of us. Dated in high school, engaged in college, married after his graduation, and kids after I established a career. My kids are 5 and 3. We've been married for 10 years. We separated but stayed legally married 3.5 years ago because I finally admitted to him and myself that I'm a lesbian. Oh, Oh, ad nauseam. I thought that I could fake it till I make it, but I just couldn't do it anymore. It was strained for a while and we continued couples therapy. Ultimately, we both wanted to do the best for our kids. For us, that meant continuing to live together. He lives in the apartment above our detached garage because neither of us want to be single parents. Eventually, we both started dating other people and I met my girlfriend Krista a year and a half ago. She knew that I had kids and an unconventional co-parenting arrangement upfront, and I told her I was still legally married after 6 months of dating. She had been fine with our living/co-parenting style prior to this, but was less than thrilled by my lack of official divorce. She asked if divorce was eventful, and I told her yes. Dave and I agreed we divorced when it was no longer mutually beneficial to remain married. For example, a new potential spouse. The longer Krista and I were together, the more my being married bothered her. She feels remaining married symbolizes I'm subconsciously clinging to my straight identity and is a barrier to moving on with my life, which I mildly disagree with but understand. She does not want to get married and had voiced the opinion that it was just a piece of paper, so I'm surprised it's become such a big deal. I agreed 4 months ago that I would bring it up with Dave and set a timeline for divorce by the end of this year to make her happy. 2 months ago, Dave's company downsized his job, and a week later he found out his increasing fatigue and illness was aggressive leukemia. He's undergoing treatment that is estimated to be 10% effective in cases like his, and they told him to consider that this might be terminal. If the treatment fails, they've given him 6 months to a year. For Krista, this changes nothing. For me, divorcing Dave now would make what is potentially his final months even harder than they have to be. Whether she likes it or not, he's the father of my children and my oldest friend. To force the issue while he's fighting for his life would be incredibly selfish and damaging to both him and our kids. She's telling me that not only am I regressing into denial about my sexuality by refusing to bring it up again, but also that I'm already a selfish asshole by leading her on, and that I want the best of both worlds by remaining married to a man while continuing to date a woman.
Every night, yeah, all the time, I'm calling out to you. Seems every time I take a drink, I'm reaching out for you. Seems I'm always late night texting, reaching out for you. Every morning I find drunken messages spilling the truth on you.
Am I the asshole for refusing to forgive my cousin after she tried to get with my boyfriend? I, 18 male, have been with my boyfriend, 18 male, since May of 2019. We are both bisexual. Last year, when everything started to shut down, my parents offered to let my cousin, Amy, 18 female, stay with us as she is immunocompromised, and her parents are both doctors, where mine are both able to work from home. Everything was fine for a while, and we mostly kept to ourselves, did our schoolwork, and spent time online with our friends. A few weeks in, I was sat in the kitchen on FaceTime with my boyfriend. Usually, I would have done this in my bedroom, but my dad's office is next to my room, and he was on an important work call. She came in to get something, and must have glanced over my shoulder and seen him. When I had ended the call, she asked who he was. I told her he was my boyfriend, and she just made the comment that he was cute. At the time, it didn't seem like it was going to be a big deal. But after that, whenever I tried to have a call with my friends, or my boyfriend, she would try to come into my room. She tried to play it off as wanting to ask me a question, but it was happening too often, and she would keep asking, "Don't I get to say hi?" Which I found odd. We go to different schools, and she had never met my friends or shown any interest in them before this point. And if my phone rang while we were in the same room, she would always ask if it was the cute boyfriend. And she started making comments about how she wished that she had met him first. I asked her to stop, as it was making me feel uncomfortable. It got worse. She found him on Facebook and started sending flirty and sexual messages to him. He blocked her, and she made a second account and continued until he blocked her again. She then got into my phone and found his number and started texting and calling him. She would leave voicemails, and it was always about how good she would be as his girlfriend and how he should leave me for her, and everything that she would do for him. She even sent him nudes, and he blocked her number. I told my parents what she was doing and showed them the proof, and they told her that she had to leave because she was making me so uncomfortable. I've not spoken to her since. My extended family are now trying to make plans for this summer, hoping everyone can get together. And I'm refusing to go to anything she's at because I feel she would just try again. Everyone except my parents are telling me that I'm ruining the plans just to be spiteful, as she has apologized. Which was just a half-assed sorry when she realized my parents were serious about her going back home. I feel like an asshole, because it means we can't have any family plans, and I'm essentially making everyone choose between us. But I don't want to be around her if she's going to keep making me uncomfortable. Edit 1, my boyfriend didn't want to involve the police or anything. 2, the nudes were deleted. And 3, my parents are likely to go even if I don't. They support me in my choice not to go. And edit 2, we have arranged a family Zoom call for next weekend, and I've said I want to be able to say my piece before anything else. I plan to lay everything out, telling everyone exactly what she did. It should be interesting. If I remember, I will update with what happens. And now in the comments, not the asshole. Would it do any good to email screenshots of all the messages and photos after censoring them to every relative that complained? She didn't just flirt, she stalked and sexually harassed your boyfriend. It's not any less bad because she's a woman and he's a man. I don't know about a judgment here. She deliberately went after your boyfriend. There apparently wasn't alcohol involved, and this wasn't one-time stupidity. Her apology was apparently family mandated and not sincere. If you can't ever be in the same space as her again, that's up to you. Your parents will be collateral damage, and that is unavoidable. They will probably choose you when push comes to shove, and that means that they'll have to see the other relatives off holiday. This is all her fault, not yours. If you have grandparents, they are even more stuck in the middle because they have equal devotion to the both of you. They may now have to alternate holidays with you guys and her family. Your extended family want things back to normal. At least enough to have everyone in the same room again. You likely won't ever be close buddies with your cousin again, as I'm sure your parents do too. That can only happen if they insist that she get real help for what she did. Sending her cousin's boyfriend nude pictures is a red flag that she is disturbed. If she's that off, you also have an obligation to protect any significant other from her. Can't you just ignore her? I mean, attending a meetup where she's also present isn't the same as forgiving her. And OP says, ignoring her wouldn't be easy, because our grandparents are always pushing for us to always be together at any family stuff. Our Nan has a bit of an obsession with wanting us to be best friends because we are the same age. I'm only 4 days older than her. And then the responsibility to make amends would be on me, because they would want me to forgive her to be friends again to make everyone happy, even if she doesn't apologize.
You've got the most beautiful diamond. You've got the most beautiful diamond eyes I've ever seen in my whole life. The skyline is jealous, I'm looking at you, how you shine.
And now on to the update. Taking some advice from the original post, I decided to speak to my family all together. We had a group Zoom call on Saturday. It was interesting to say the least. On the call, it was me and my parents, my cousin Amy, and her parents, my grandparents, and my other 2 aunts. It was the first time seeing my cousin since my parents sent her back to her parents last year. Even just seeing her on the screen made me feel uncomfortable. I laid out everything she did. I told everyone about the messages she sent my boyfriend, the voicemails she left, and I told them about the nudes. I didn't go into a lot of detail about them, but I gave a basic description so they could understand how indecent the pictures were. Amy was pissed. I hadn't even finished speaking, and she was screaming at me. She was swearing and insulting me a lot, and used the F slur a number of times. A lot of it boiled down to me being a horrible person spreading lies about her. I asked if anyone wanted to see screenshots of the messages she had been sending my boyfriend. She launched into saying they must have been faked. After she had calmed down, I said to everyone that this is why I was uncomfortable about being around her. She had invaded my privacy and harassed my boyfriend, and she had never apologized or shown any remorse. My nan started telling me that I should just forgive her to make it easier for everyone. I said that I needed a real apology to both me and my boyfriend before I could even think about forgiving her, especially as she is still acting like she did nothing wrong. My nan and my aunts then started tearing into me, saying that I was tearing the family apart over nothing. My mum then cut in and said that Amy was lucky that my boyfriend didn't decide to go to the police after everything she did. She also said that if everyone thinks that I am at fault for not forgiving her, rather than her being at fault for what she did, maybe we needed to have some time where we are not in contact. This didn't go over well with my nan, but my mum stuck by it. It is not the outcome that I wanted, but maybe being no contact with that part of the family might give me time to move forward from what happened. And now in the comments, I'm happy your mum stood up for you and you were able to explain everything to everyone. It's sad how some of your family members reacted, not including the cousin, but hopefully they will come around with time, and if you want to, the relationship can be rebuilt. Wow, your family are crazy for defending your cousin. I would go no contact too. So after you reveal everything that your cousin did to your boyfriend with proof, they just said, just forgive and forget. Hell no. If I was in your boyfriend's shoes, I would report everything she did to the police. I'm glad your mum stood by with what she said. Good on OP's mum here, but goddamn, what a shitty family to still be trying to pressure OP into letting it go after the cousin throws a bunch of slurs around during the group Zoom call that they are all in. Right? I have a horrible family, and they would not say that word in a group setting. They are unequivocally the worst, and I am glad that I am no contact with most. I would bet that there is some homophobia involved with the family siding against him when it's pretty freaking obvious that the cousin was the one being inappropriate. Gross. I think the family devalues OP's same-sex relationship, so cousin's harassment is not so bad as interfering in a real relationship would be. Props to mum for calling out the BS and dropping the rope. Our next post is titled, I, 22 male, got a girlfriend, and my gay best friend, 22 male, stopped talking to me. So I'm a bisexual guy, and my friend Steve, whom I've known for 10 plus years, is gay. We come from conservative families, so we didn't even know the concept of queerness when we were young. Steve and I were inseparable throughout our teenage years, and people joked that we were like brothers. We managed to get into the same college and moved to a big city when we were 17 years old. This exposed us to a completely different world, and Steve realized that he was gay. I realized that I too was attracted to men. Not knowing anything about the queer stuff, I thought I was gay too. Steve and I found other queer people, and our new friend circle was made of gay people. We couldn't tell our families that we were queer, so Steve and I could only depend on each other. We started dating men, but our initial relationships weren't very serious. After my first gay relationship ended, I realized that I was attracted to both men and women. I was bisexual. I told this to my group of queer friends, who said that I was going through a phase, that years of brainwashing was the reason that I was attracted to women, that I would get over it, and they told me that I was gay. Steve refused to accept that I was bisexual and told me that bisexuality wasn't real. I tried to convince him, but he refused to accept that I wasn't gay. We were roommates, and this started causing a lot of tension between us. I decided to let it go and stopped trying to convince him. Things went back to normal, and I had 2 more gay relationships. Steve got into a serious relationship with a senior, and our families didn't know anything about this. Then I met my current girlfriend Mary at a bar. Mary and I hit it off immediately. We exchanged numbers and kept talking for a week before I invited her to our flat. I introduced her to Steve, and Mary and I went into my room. When she was leaving, I noticed that Steve was glaring at her. I didn't think much about this. Mary and I started meeting more often, and Steve refused to talk to her. I decided to ask him about it, and he told me that Mary was not good for me and asked me why I was being so close to a woman. I asked him what he meant by that, and he just stormed off. Steve started fighting me about trivial things that didn't matter before. Mary and I made our relationship official a few weeks later, and I posted about it on my story. When I got back to our flat, Steve and a few friends were waiting for me. Steve started shouting at me, asking how I could betray him. He told me that I turned my back on him, and he called Mary a witch. I reminded him that I was bisexual, and assured him that I wasn't leaving him. Our friends took Steve's side and asked me why I started dating a woman. They agreed with Steve that Mary bewitched me. I left our flat, and when I came back later, Steve refused to talk to me and told me that he wouldn't talk to me as long as I was in a relationship with Mary. I hoped that this would blow over, but Steve refuses to talk to me a month later. I really like Mary, and I don't want to end our relationship, but Steve needs my support, and nobody back home knows anything about us being queer. We would most probably be disowned if they found out. How do I handle this situation? Edit. I don't want to leave him because he has nobody else to support him. When he comes out to his family, I'm sure that it'll be ugly, and I want to be there for him when that happens. Now in the comments, notice how he said, "How could you betray him?" He's acting like a jilted lover. He probably has feelings for you beyond friendship and was secretly hoping that you would get together someday. As others have said, both he and your other friends are entitled, childish, and toxic. Even if Mary was not in the picture, you would be far better off without them. They are taking the view that you taking an interest in a female is invalidating their sexual orientation. Only people with severely effed up worldviews project their own insecurities onto their friends. Ignore them. Do not bother to interact with them. Make arrangements to move away from them. Not in with Mary, it's too soon for that, and would probably frighten her to death if you suggest it at this early stage. Keeping them in your life will be entirely to its detriment. My first instinct too was believing Steve likes OP, just from reading the title. But knowing they come from similar backgrounds, I think Steve's feelings of betrayal stems from the feeling that since OP is now in a relationship with a woman, he won't need to come out to his family, hence feeling alone and betrayed. However, bisexuality isn't real? Yeah, dump these friends. I feel like this is more a valid possibility, especially since they were really good friends first. I'm gay. Your friends are not good people. Yelling at you? Passive-aggressive tantrums? Sorry, no. Find better friends. Tell them they are total bigots, and you cannot believe how hateful they are being. Good luck, dude. This, OP, it's time for you to get angry. Bi erasure is a huge problem, and it's just as problematic as internalized homophobia. You have the right to love whom you love, and true friends wouldn't deny you that simply because they feel it threatens their own identity. Hint, it doesn't. Sit him down one more time, but this time, be firm and allow your anger to show. Tell him that he is being discriminatory and bigoted. Do a little research in advance and print out some articles to hand to him, and you're going to have to educate yourself and him. Explain to him why bi erasure is wrong, and also why you are still queer even though you were dating a woman. Bi is still queer. Then put your foot down and tell him that if he can't accept you for who and what you are, then your friendship will end and you will move out. Wanting to be there for him is great, but why does he get to not be there for you? And now, onto the update. So after I posted on Reddit, I decided to tell Mary about Steve not talking to me. She was extremely supportive and told me that she would support me in anything that I decided to do. Some people asked if Mary knew about my gay relationships. I told her about my earlier relationships and me being bisexual in our first date, and she was okay with it. I did not know biphobia was a thing until the comments told me about it yesterday. I assumed that everyone in the LGBT community supported each other, and I thought I was doing something wrong. As many people suggested, I decided to cut off my toxic friend circle, and I won't be talking to them in the future. A comment about the relationship between Steve and I being codependent made me think of our friendship. I realized that we were depending on each other too much. We were the only connection to home left for each other, and this made us way too dependent on each other. I felt like we needed space from each other. I decided to move out, and when I told Steve about this, he started crying and begging me not to leave. He said that he would talk to me, and that he would tolerate Mary. I told him that we were being codependent, and he wouldn't need to tolerate me if he didn't like my choices. I told him that I would be there for him when he decides to come out, and that he could always count on my support. Steve kept crying, but I told him my decision was final. I went back to my room, called Mary, and started crying. I did not want to leave my friend alone. She listened to what I had to say and reassured me. I had to look for a new place to live, but Mary called me a few hours later and told me that one of her friends has a room and that I could move in with him. I thanked her for her help. Steve's friends started calling and yelling at me for abandoning them for a girl. They accused me of being a bad friend and accused Mary of breaking up our friendship. When I called Mary later, she told me that my friends were calling her and shouting at her for breaking up my friendships. I apologized, but she was very understanding and told me that she would be there for me if I needed her. Hearing her say that made me feel better. I'm moving out, putting some distance between Steve and I, and blocking my earlier friends. This ordeal has made me understand that I made the right decision by sticking with Mary, and I appreciate her way more now. Lots of you mentioned that Steve might have feelings for me. I have only ever thought of him as a friend, and I might have given it a shot before, but now I'm afraid of a romantic relationship with him. Thank you to all the people who gave me advice and helped me decide. And now in the comments, damn, Mary sounds like an absolute saint. I am glad that she is so understanding and isn't blaming you in any way for the abuse that she's getting. Steve's friends sound like a nightmare. From their initial bi erasure to them harassing someone for being in a happy relationship? Cutting them out was definitely the right move. I'm sorry your friendship with Steve has suffered so much from the fallout. Hopefully he'll come to his senses eventually. The term bi erasure summed up my life for a long time, 45. I married a man to hide my bisexuality. When we separated, I only dated men. It wasn't until I finally started dating women did I realize ease with myself. It is still very hard to be open because of this, and I'm relieved to know that it's common. One thing to be clear, you didn't abandon Steve for Mary. You would have gladly stayed in Steve's life if he hadn't been acting so miserably bad towards you and Mary. You were leaving because Steve is acting like an asshole when you have only offered support. His offer to tolerate Mary is also ridiculous, and I hope he's going to realize that. It is sad that it came to this, but sometimes the best thing to do for yourself is to leave a friendship behind when they aren't treating you well. I don't understand people who are biphobic. They accept that people can be attracted to their own gender, they accept that people can be attracted to the opposite gender, but for some reason, both at the same time? Completely impossible. Make it make sense. I'm bi, and there is also a lot of stigma, like gold star, which is gay and lesbian person who has never been with the opposite sex. They look down on those who have. Whether it was because they were in denial of their sexuality or a bi, it doesn't matter to a gold star, and they will straight up refuse to have anything to do with bi people. We are also stereotyped as tramps and serial cheaters or fetishized, and people try to push us into group sex. Well, you like both, so I thought you'd be into a threesome. Just because I'm attracted to both sexes doesn't mean that I'm not into having a monogamous relationship. It used to get so disappointing when I'd start a relationship with a guy and they would start trying to bring up threesomes with another woman as a fantasy of theirs. I have always, and will continue, to always block unicorn hunters on dating sites. I'm not your sex toy. I'm a real person with real feelings. I understand that it works for some people, but I do not personally know anyone who has had this experience go well. No thanks. Sidebar, Mary is a keeper, 100%. A lot of people would have run from all that drama. Anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed that story. If you did, let me know what you thought of it down in the comments below, and I'll see you on the next episode. Bye.